Hello, greetings from Miami University Regional's Career Services. And today we're going to be talking with you about your basic interview skills and getting you ready for your upcoming interviews. And so we're going to begin by introducing our staff to you. My name is Doug Reichenberger, and I'm the director of the Career Center. And Linda Vogt is our program associate. And Linda and I travel back and forth between Hamilton and Middletown. And then Steve Wayne is our Assistant Director for Employer Relations, and he is primarily responsible for making connections with employers. And so if you're looking for internships and full-time career opportunities and have questions about the career fair and things of that nature, Steve is your point person for that. And then Emily Cardwell Snively is our Assistant Director of Career Development. And Emily and I are going to be collaborating today on this presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Emily.
Sure. So when you come into an interview situation, there are a few main objectives to keep in mind. So first, you want to tell your story as it relates to that specific position. So by that, we mean you want to frame your experience and skills in a way that demonstrates to the employer how you would be the best fit. You're also going to want to express your personality, communication skills, general style. So you want the employer to get a sense of who you really are. So they've probably seen your resume at this point. Now they get to see the real person. And so that's a chance to let your personality and communication style show through. But interviews are also a two-way street. So the employer is gathering information about you, but it's an opportunity for you to gather information about the employer. So you're going to be asking questions to get information about the organization and the position as well, so you know what to expect. And then finally, it's an opportunity to explore employment with that company.
So there are several different interview types that you want to be aware of. First is a screening type interview. That can be happen over the phone or through video calls and in person, generally through our job fairs. And so on those screening interviews, you'll want to present yourself as a well-qualified candidate. And typically they're going to be short, maybe 15, 20 minutes, 30 probably at the most. And at career fairs, even less than that, just a few minutes, really. So you have to be thinking in terms of what is that I'm going to say during that time period. And that's a good time for you to do your elevator speech. And the elevator speech is just a real quick synopsis of your experiences, your education, and your career goals. And then expressing how you might be a good fit for the organization that you're talking to. Later, if you do well in that screening interview, then you can be invited for a selection interview. And that's going to be a longer event and will require some more training or research and preparation for that particular opportunity. So oftentimes it's one-on-one, or it could be in a panel situation. So you would have several interviewers firing off some questions to you. Could be a structured interview, and that's one that the employer has paid for a interview system, and it'll have some very specific questions and a rating system that goes along with that. And then most common is actually a behavior-based interview. And we'll talk more about each of these in a little bit later.
So the most important thing you can do when you're getting ready for an interview is to prepare as much as you can. So what that involves is doing a lot of research. So you're going to read and reread the job description, maybe print it out and highlight the key points. So you're walking in knowing exactly what the position might entail and what they're looking for, so you can make sure you can show them how you will fulfill their needs. You're also going to want to do some research about the career field, because they may ask you, what do you know about this field? What do you see as some problems in this field, and how would you be posed to address them? Things like that. So it's important to be prepared there. Also anticipate the questions that they might ask you. And again, a good way to do that is by looking at the job description. So if it says that they're looking for somebody who's a good communicator, you can probably bet they're going to ask about a time you had to communicate with someone. So use the job description as a guide there. And also know the salary range, because when you get further along in the interview process and they make you an offer, it's important to know how much to expect when they give you that offer. So there are a couple sites that you can use to look up salary data. One is just salary.com. Another is Glassdoor. You do have to make an account to use Glassdoor, but it's really just as simple as signing up with your email, and they have lots of salary data on there as well. Also know the technology. So if you were going to be doing a video call in particular, make sure that you know how to use Zoom or Google Meet or whatever the company is using. Make sure your Wi-Fi connection is strong. Look and see what's in the background to make sure there's nothing crazy back there, and practice with it so there aren't any surprises on the day of your interview. Dress for success too. So make sure you're wearing your business attire, wearing a suit. If it's a video interview, make sure you're looking good on the top at least. And also think about what industry you're trying to get into and what the dress code usually is there. And finally, if you're going there in person, make sure you learn the route. So if you can drive there ahead of time just to see how long it might take, and if there's any crazy stoplights or anything like that, make sure you do that. And at the very least, get a good sense on Google Maps of where you're going.
And as you prepare for the interview, you want to be thinking about skill sets that you are especially gifted in. And these are some skill sets that probably all employers are actually looking for, regardless of the type of career path that you're pursuing. And these come to us from NACE, which is our professional association for career services and human resource recruiters. And so every year, NACE will conduct a survey asking employers, what are the top skill sets that you're seeking? And so here's an example of these in rank order, actually. So critical thinking and problem solving is the top skill. Secondly is teamwork and collaboration. Thirdly, professionalism and work ethic. So all of these things are really important to be thinking about. And then you need to be able to give some examples of how you've demonstrated these skills. And during that interview, an employer may ask you some specific skill example or specific questions rather that are related to these skill sets. But if they don't, be sure that you take an opportunity to interject some of these and to help you to be set apart from the other types of candidates that might be interviewing.
So again, as you're preparing for the interview, it's important to do some self-reflection. So think about who you are, what you want the employer to know about you, and how you can tell your story in the most effective way. Rehearse your answers. So we mentioned earlier, you want to anticipate any interview questions that might be asked. So practice answers to those. Try saying them out loud, maybe as you're driving in your car or something like that. That really helps you sound confident, but not overly rehearsed. Make sure you clearly define your career goals so you know what you want, and so you know when you go into the interview if this is going to be a position that will help you reach those career goals. Also, again, important to know the organization, do some research, find out who the leadership is of the organization, what's their mission, what's the organizational structure, everything like that. And then once you know that information, think about how you might fit into the organization. And then the most important tip we can give you is just to practice as much as possible.
And so as you engage in an interview, this is your opportunity to make your first impression, and you want it to be the best possible. So be sure that you're punctual, whether that's an in-person or a video interview. You want to be at least 5 minutes ahead of that particular appointment. And if you are going in person, be sure that you check yourself before going in and make sure that your hair is combed properly and that you don't have any smudges on your face and that you have your collar adjusted properly and also, all of those kinds of last minute details. And then as you go inside, introduce yourself with a smile and be as positive and energetic as you can be. And remember that the people that you are meeting, even in a reception area, are evaluating you. And so you want to make your best impression possible. And so be prepared with every person that you come in contact with. What should you bring? Well, bring your resume and your reference page, some work samples. So maybe you have some projects or some writing samples or research that you have conducted, and bring that along with you so that you can share with that employer. And then also have some prepared questions. So as we mentioned, you need to anticipate what the employer is going to be asking, but you also need to be asking them some questions. So have a list. I would suggest maybe as many as 10 questions that you might be able to ask. You may not get through all 10, but I would have a good list so that when they do ask, do you have any questions for us, you would never want to respond with, no, I don't think so at this time. That would be inappropriate. So be sure that you have a good list of questions. And then lastly is to take a Padfolio with you. And guess what? We have some free ones for you. So as a senior in particular, come to the Career Center and pick up your Padfolio, and that will be a great tool that you can take with you to put all of your papers and important documents with you as you go to the interview. And so some sample questions that you might hear during the interview. There are those standard questions of, tell me a little about yourself, which is the most often question that begins the interview. And most people are stumped by that question, actually. And they wonder, what is it that I'm supposed to say? Well, you clearly don't need to tell them about when you were born and where and about your family and your pets and things of that nature. That's not why you're there. What you do want to do is to tell them about your current status, that you are a student or graduating from Miami University, and what your degree is, and a little about your career goals and some of your work experience that is relevant again to the position that you're applying to. And so that's the kind of information that the employer is looking for. You should be able to do that in between 30 and 45 seconds. So you need to craft an elevator speech that you can convey that information in a short period of time, and to be upbeat and positive as you're presenting that. Other questions might be from that behavior-based type interview. And so here's an example of what a behavior-based question looks like. Give an example of a goal you set and then how you went about achieving it. Because it's really an opportunity for you to tell a story. All right, so you need to think of your best examples of what you've done in the past, and then share that particular example and tell your story. Another question might be, give an example of a time when you went above and beyond the call of duty. Well, if you're not prepared for a question like that, you might be sitting there really kind of fumbling around wondering, how can I answer this question? Um, so anticipate and then practice answering questions like that. And then lastly is the questions for the interviewer. And as we mentioned, you need to be prepared to ask some great questions. So here's an example. How is an employee evaluated and or promoted here at this company? And you would need to think about other questions that you would be asking, like, what are the most challenging facets of this position? And what are your expectations for new hires? And is there a training program that goes along with this position? And how often would I be evaluated and by whom? Things of that nature are things that you would want to know before coming into the position. And that will also tell the employer that you're well prepared and that you have been thinking about how you could potentially fit into this organization.
After the interview, it's really important that you follow up. So the first thing you'll want to do is send a thank you note within about 24 hours, just thanking the interviewer for their time, reiterating your interest in the position, and maybe mentioning something from your interview so they remember who you are. Then take some time to evaluate the interview, think about how it went, think about the people you met, and think about whether that's going to be a good fit for you. Follow through. So if you haven't heard from them in a couple weeks, make sure you're following up with them to hear about where they're at in their process. And keep good notes too. So make sure you're taking notes during the interview, and then even beyond, maybe take some time to take some notes and reflect on how the experience was for you.
And in addition, if the employer is asking for you to follow up by sending them some documentation, for example, your transcript, they may ask for you to do that. And so be sure that you, in fact, do send the transcript and any other information that they may have been asking for after you've completed that interview. Contemplating your offers. So we're assuming that you have performed very well and that you're actually getting offers from employers. And wouldn't it be cool if you had more than one? Um, and and quite frankly, that does happen. Um, we've had our students who have told us numerous times of how they have multiple offers, and that's really exciting when something like that happens. But how do you go about deciding on which one of those offers is best for you? First, be sure to ask for that offer in writing. Generally, it's going to be an email. And so you would like to have that documentation in writing. Secondly, is that ask for time to consider. It would never be appropriate for you to just respond on the spot to say, okay, sure, I'll take it. You need to think about several factors before you actually accept that offer. And so it's appropriate to ask for a minimum of 24 hours. But in some cases, especially if you're in the midst of 2 or more interviews at a time, maybe you'll need several days and possibly even a full week before you might be able to know which position might be the best fit for you. And then obviously assess your particular fit with this organization and the type of position that you would be engaged in. And so really do some hard thinking in terms of how could I go about doing my best in this particular setting, and how can I be the best contributor to this organization? And again, as Emily pointed out earlier, know what you're worth. So research those salaries and find out what the salary ranges are. And if their salary offer is lower than what you expected, then come back with a counter offer. And it should be a range, and I would suggest a minimum of a $5,000 range. And depending on where the offer is, maybe it needs to be even more than that, but I was somewhere in that range. And then once you make the decision and you accept the offer, keep that commitment. We have heard too many times from both employers and from students when they uh, had accepted an offer and maybe sometimes too quickly, and then they got another offer from a different employer, and they really, really, really wanted that job, but they made it a commitment to another. And employers do talk to each other, and so it's to your benefit if you, again, take the time to think through this carefully and then keep that commitment.
So, one way that you can practice your interview skills before the actual interview is to schedule a mock interview with one of us in the Career Services office. So, you can request an appointment through Handshake. All of our availability is up to date on there. So, schedule an appointment with us. We'll do a video call at this time. We'll ask you about 15 minutes of questions and then do about a 15-minute review. We have a rubric that we follow, so we'll talk through your responses and give you some other pointers. Make sure that you dress professionally how you would on the day of the interview. Again, make sure, since we're doing a video call, that your background is professional. Try using the spot you plan to use for any interviews that you do have. And before the mock interview, make sure you send us your resume and a job description for a position that interests you, because we'll use those to come up with questions for you. I know students in the past have said to me that mock interviews make them nervous too, as much as regular interviews, but you don't need to be nervous. A little bit of nerves are okay for interview settings. We understand that, but we're all very nice in Career Services, and we want to help you. So don't be afraid of mock interviews. They're a really great way to get some practice.
Right. Yeah, we can be your best friend. And these mock interviews can be so valuable. And in fact, there have been some times when we've been able to invite some employers to come and conduct some of those mock interviews. And wouldn't you know, um, the students have performed so well in some of those situations that the mock interviewer then says, I'd like to talk with you further about some job opportunities with our company. And so it can lead to actually a real job. Um, so anyway, it's a great opportunity for you to practice, and could be some real perks at the end of that. So if you have any questions for us in regards to preparing for your interview, here's our website, and we would encourage you to check it out. Come see what other resources and tools that we have available for you on our webpage. And again, reach out to us either through email, phone call, or stop by our Career Services office. We have offices on both campuses of Middletown and Hamilton, and we encourage you to come see us.